Now here comes the order, in outline form, if you please, of the Old Testament prophetic program, as I've been calling it now for the last 4 years. And here it is. Then, after they had rejected their king, then he, God, will speak unto them, that is, the nations of the world, in his, not love and mercy and grace, but what? In his wrath. See? He will speak to them in his wrath and vex them in his sore displeasure. In other words, God is going to pour out all of the wrath and the vexation that he can possibly place during what we know as the tribulation. And of course, that's described then so graphically in the book of Revelation. All right, then immediately following verse 5, the tribulation, what's the next event in the timeline? Yet have I set my king upon the holy hill of Zion. And then look at what the king will accomplish. I will declare the decree, the Lord has said unto me, thou art my son. This is God the Father speaking to God the Son. This day have I begotten thee. And remember, the begotten is the resurrection. Verse 8, ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen, not only the Jew, but the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of heaven? No, of the earth for thy possession. Now that's speaking of his rule and reign here on the earth. And then verse 9 backs up a little bit again to the tribulation. Thou shalt break them, that is, the nations of the world, with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel, which of course will culminate at Armageddon. And then just come down to verse 11, serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Verse 12, kiss the Son. See? Some people say, well, the Son isn't mentioned in Scripture. Oh, yes, he is. In the Old Testament, I mean. Here he is, God the Son. Lest he be angry and you perish from the way when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all they that put their trust in him. All right, now in the few moments we have left, I'm going to put our Old Testament timeline on the board again, if I may. And it's just simply the progression of time, all the way from Adam at 4004 BC, and then, I suppose about, I'm going to, in round figures, put it halfway between Abraham at 2000 BC. We had the flood. It isn't quite that far. It's about 1400. But nevertheless, remember that these first 2,000 years of human history are covered in the first 11 chapters of Genesis. Chapter 12 now begins then with Abraham, and all the rest of the Old Testament goes from that point on. Then from the call of Abraham, or Abram as we know him in chapter 12, all the way up to the cross, is another 2,000 years. And all during this 2,000 years, God has been dealing predominantly, as I've often put on the board, Jew only, with the exceptions. And you can think of them: Nineveh, Rahab, Ruth, the Syrian general Naaman. You come into Christ's earthly ministry, it was the Canaanite woman, and then the Roman centurion. Those are the only two that he dealt with in his earthly ministry. But otherwise, it's all God dealing with the nation of Israel. And then Psalms 2 says that after they've rejected him, Jew and Gentile in consort, they have put him to death. Psalms 110, of course, tells us, come sit at the Father's right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. So that's his ascension. But so far as Psalms 2 is concerned now, immediately after the crucifixion, the rejection, there would come that undetermined period of time where there could be a derision of the nations, and then would come the 7 years of tribulation, which of course is in Daniel, and then the king would return and Israel could have the kingdom. Now that's Psalms 2 in outline. And that's all the Old Testament knows. Now, you're all well read enough in Scripture. What's missing? Well, the church. the age of grace. It isn't in here. Why? Because it's a secret held in the mind of God, and it will be a secret until God reveals it. And that's why I'm constantly telling people, don't look for the rapture or the church in the Gospels. It's not in there. Don't look for the rapture of the church or church doctrine or gospel as we know it in the Old Testament. It's not in there. Because it's a secret held in the mind of God. He's dealing only with the nation of Israel. Now we know that as soon as Christ ascended, Israel kept on rejecting the offer of the king and the kingdom, and so what did God do? He moved all of this out into the future, and He puts in an undetermined period of time. No one knows when it's going to end, and then the 7 years will come in, then Christ will return, and then the King will come and set up His kingdom. Now, I can't put it any simpler than that. But what I want you to understand as we go through the early part of Acts, Peter and the other 11 are going to operate only on what God has revealed, and that is the Old Testament. Peter has no concept of God turning to the Gentiles for 1900 and some years. It is so intricate in what God does. Why 6 men?